Okay, so picture this. You're in Vatican City, right? And you see them, these incredibly colorful figures, the Swiss Guard.
Instantly recognizable. Those Renaissance uniforms really stand out.
Totally. But you look at them and think, okay, what's the real story here? It feels like something out of another time.
And you'd be right. Their origins, well, they go way deeper than just protecting the Pope. Much deeper.
So today on the Deep Dive, we're digging into exactly that. We're using this article, The Origin of the Vatican Swiss Guard Elite Warriors with a Medieval Past.
Yep. We're going to unpack how these mountain militias from the Alps basically turned into Europe's most wanted mercenaries, and then eventually the Pope's personal bodyguard.
And for you, the learner listening in, our goal here is to give you a really solid, kind of concise understanding of this whole surprising history. You'll probably learn some things you didn't expect.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating journey.
Okay, so let's dive in. Where does this story even kick off? Way back, I assume.
Way back. We're talking medieval period, high up in the Alps, in these, often pretty isolated mountain communities. Future Switzerland, basically.
Right. Not a country yet, just on communities.
Exactly. And living there, it wasn't easy. They really needed to figure out how to protect themselves. Self-preservation was key.
So not like a king ordering an army, but more like neighbors getting together for defense.
Precisely. Think militias, mostly made up of farmers, craftsmen,
Yeah.
people who had to learn to fight together because, well, they had to.
Out of necessity.
Pure necessity. And they got good at it. Disciplined. They learned to use weapons like halberds, long pikes.
Pikes, right. The super long spears.
Yeah, very long. And they developed these effective phalanx-style formations. Think tight blocks of men with spears.
Like a walking hedgehog, almost. So the whole village could kind of snap into formation if needed.
That's a good way to put it. It was truly collective defense. And don't underestimate them, these formations, these disciplined blocks. They could actually stand up to armored knights.
Seriously. Against cavalry charges and all that.
Absolutely. Imagine charging into a dense wall of 6-meter-long spear points held by disciplined men working together. It could break a charge, negate the knight's advantage. Unity was their strength.
Okay, that's impressive. But how do they go from protecting their own villages to being hired guns across Europe? That's a big leap.
It is. A key step was the Swiss Confederation starting to form around the late 13th century. That meant more cooperation between these different communities, these cantons.
Ah, okay. So they started working together more on a larger scale.
Right. And military service just became ingrained. It was part of the culture. Young men trained early, and soon other powers noticed their discipline on the battlefield, their cohesion.
That teamwork thing again.
Exactly. That plus their tactics made them very appealing as mercenaries, especially down in Italy during the Renaissance, which was, constantly bubbling with conflicts.
So it wasn't just that they were tough fighters individually, it was how they fought together.
That was the core of it. Think about their kit. Those super long pikes for reach, halberds, kind of like an axe and spear, combined, plus swords and daggers for closer work.
Versatile.
And practical armor. Not always the heaviest, because they needed mobility, but good breastplates, round shields sometimes, but always those tight phalanx formations, discipline, unity.
The article calls them clockwork gears of a war machine. I like that. Everything moving together perfectly.
It's a fitting analogy. But, there were other mercenary groups around, lots of them. What made the Swiss stand out so much?
Good question. Was it just that they were better fighters?
They were excellent fighters, no doubt.
Yeah.
But a huge part of it was their code of honor, their ethics, strangely enough.
Ethics for mercenaries. That sounds counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? But unlike many groups who'd happily switch sides if someone offered more money.
Which happened all the time, I bet.
Constantly. The Swiss, however, had this reputation for sticking to their contracts. Their word was their bond. Breaking a deal was a massive dishonor.
Wow. So in a world of shifting loyalties, they offered reliability. You hired the Swiss, you knew they'd stay bought.
Exactly. That reputation for dependability, for discipline, it made them the gold standard. Their loyalty became, legendary. A huge selling point.
Okay, that makes sense. But why become mercenaries? Was it just the lure of fighting?
Not entirely. We need to look at the economics back home. Yeah. Switzerland. That's mountainous, right? Not a lot of easy farmland.
Limited resources.
Very limited. So for many young men, there just weren't many opportunities at home. Mercenary work became a genuine career path, a way to earn money, support their families.
So it was an economic driver, almost a necessity for some communities.
Absolutely. The money these soldiers earned and sent back was vital. It propped up local economies in the Alps. It wasn't just war, it was an economic strategy for entire regions.
Fascinating. Less about glory, more about putting food on the table back home.
For many, yes,
Hmm.
though the reputation certainly didn't hurt. Now, of course, success breeds competition. They had rivals.
Ah, yeah. Who were they up against mainly?
The big ones were the German Landsknechts. They actually copied a lot of the Swiss tactics and weapons, became pretty formidable themselves.
So Swiss tactics started spreading.
They did, and beyond rivals, the nature of war itself started changing. Technology marches on.
Right. Things like gunpowder.
Exactly. Firearms, better artillery. These things started making those dense plague formations more vulnerable. You can't stop a cannonball with a pike wall indefinitely.
Yeah. Tough reality check. Was there a specific moment when this became obvious?
Many historians point to the Battle of Merignano in 1515. The Swiss fought the French. The French used a combination of infantry, cavalry, and coordinated artillery fire.
And it worked against the Swiss.
It did. The Swiss suffered a major defeat. Merignano is often seen as, well, a turning point. The end, really, of the era where pike squares completely dominated the battlefield. It showed the way towards more modern, combined arms warfare.
So the peak of their battlefield power was starting to wane, but that doesn't explain the Vatican Guard. How do we get from Marignano to Rome?
Well, even if their battlefield supremacy was challenged, their reputation for courage and, crucially, that famous loyalty, that endured.
Ah, the loyalty factor again.
That's the key. And that reputation appealed directly to the Pope. So in 1506, Pope Julius II officially founded the Pontifical Swiss Guard. Their specific job, protect the Vatican and the Pope himself.
So even as tactics changed, their core values kept them relevant for this very specific high-prestige role.
Precisely. Their history, their discipline, their proven loyalty, it made them ideal for the job. And those famous uniforms, their Renaissance style, harking back to that era.
So the uniforms aren't just random colors, they connect to that history.
They absolutely do. And the Guard quickly proved their worth. The most famous example is probably the sack of Rome in 1527.
What happened there?
It was chaos. Imperial troops rampaged through Rome. A small group of Swiss Guards, something like 147 out of 189, basically fought to the death near St. Peter's Basilica to allow Pope Clement VII time to escape through a secret passage to Castel San Angelo.
Wow, they sacrificed themselves.
Most of them did. It was an incredible act of bravery and cemented their legendary status as utterly devoted protectors. You don't forget something like that.
No kidding, that's incredible dedication. So fast forward to today. What's their role now? It's mostly ceremonial, right?
Largely, yes. They still train rigorously, of course, they're a security force, but their day-to-day public role is primarily ceremonial. Guards of honor, controlling access points.
But it's more than just fancy dress.
Oh, much more. Their presence is symbolic. It represents tradition, continuity. It stands for those enduring values, loyalty, integrity, honor, right at the heart of the Catholic Church. They're like a living link, connecting the Vatican's past to its present.
So, like the article suggests, not just soldiers, but a kind of living monument.
Exactly. A monument to centuries of discipline, service, and that unique ethical code we talked about.
It's quite a story. Okay, so for you, the learner, let's try and boil this down. What are the key takeaways from this deep dive?
Okay, first, remember the Swiss phalanx, a real medieval military innovation, very effective in its day.
Got it. Phalanx innovation.
Second, mercenary work wasn't just fighting. It was a crucial economic strategy for Swiss communities back home.
Economics driving service.
Right. Third, that idea of an ethical code, especially loyalty to contract, really set the Swiss mercenaries apart.
The honor code. Unusual but important.
Fourth, think of the Vatican Guard today as this amazing historical artifact still functioning in the modern world, a living piece of history.
History in uniform. Okay.
And finally, fifth, see the whole story as a transition, from dominating battlefields to providing symbolic protection. It shows adaptability and how core values can endure even when roles change.
Adaptability and enduring values. That's a great summary. Absolutely fascinating stuff. All right, the learner, here's something to chew on after we finish. Think about that whole journey. A small group, rooted in discipline and certain values, goes from local defense to international military fame, and then pivots centuries later to serve a totally different symbolic purpose.
A long evolution.
Can you think of any modern parallels? Where else do we see groups or institutions adapt like that, holding on to core principles while their function changes dramatically over time? Something to really ponder.